Hello. So, in the spirit of love and in an effort to educate the fellowship, we put together this little video presentation to talk about the baby blue, some of the motives behind it, what it's all about, and how many of the addicts that support the baby blue. So, let's just start by talking about why we use the third edition revised basic text with the original fourth and ninth traditions, known as the baby blue. Many of us like to call it a second edition with the little white book revisions because that's what it really is. Anyway, at the World Service Conference in 1985, a motion was made by the WSC Literature Chair that the WSO be instructed to have a basic text professionally edited to ensure consistent and correct use of capitalization, verb tenses, gender, singular, plural endings, and other grammatical errors, and that edited text be returned to the Literature Review Committee for acceptance and approval prior to printing and distribution. At the WSC in 1986, a series of motions were passed to revise the Little White Book. These revisions were to eliminate the references to sobriety, eliminate implied endorsements of Alcoholics Anonymous, change recovered to recovering, and eliminate references to specific drug use. Another motion incorporated these revisions into the basic text. The third edition revised was printed because of these changes. The third edition revised stood until the end of 1987, when the WSO introduced a professionally edited fourth edition. The book was published without being sent to the fellowship for approval. This is no light editing, but a major rewrite of the basic text. Along with hundreds of minor changes, there were many conceptual changes, and nearly 30 lines were missing. At the WSC in 1988, the executive director, Bob Stone, said we could not go back to the third edition revised, as many areas had wanted to, because we had contracts with outside enterprises that had been signed and money was received. Anyway, he suggested that we fix the book by inserting the missing lines. The fifth edition was the fix that missed the point of the fellowship's objections to the fourth edition. What about the conceptual changes? The fourth and fifth edition were professionally edited and never submitted to the fellowship for the group conscience approval process. Anyway, in November 1981, the approval form of our basic text was released for fellowship approval at the 1982 World Service Conference. On May 7, 1982, Page C., the acting World Literature Chair, made a motion for our text to be approved. It was not printed and distributed until the WSC of 1983, and we found that the fourth and ninth traditions had been altered from the book that the fellowship had approved. The WSO objected to the language in the traditions, and the Board of Trustees gave them the go-ahead to delete it in the first edition. Page C made a motion that our text be restored as it was approved before any more were printed. This was the second edition. In 1984, the language in the traditions were deleted again. This is why we feel that the third edition revised with the original fourth and ninth traditions represent the last informed group conscience of the fellowship. The fourth and ninth traditions were altered from their approval form by addicts who controlled the printing and distribution of our text. Many of these missing lines were in reference to the definition of the service structure and their limitations and responsibilities to the home groups. So it seems like this is a lot of history. Are the baby blue supporters really carrying a 30-year resentment? I mean, didn't this stuff happen years and years ago? Why are we worried about it today? Well, one of the reasons that we worry about it today is because it affects our traditions. Tradition 1 is our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on NA unity. We really need to stop the fighting and we need to come together. And our common welfare is carrying the message to the addict that still suffers. The basic text is at the heart of the fellowship. It's our book. It was written by addicts for addicts. It was written in an open participatory process, and it was done in an act of love. It was done free and not for hire. There were no professional editors, and addicts literally gave their blood for this book. So here's a copy of a document signed by some of our predecessors, Jim Miller, Bo Sewell, Bill Allen, Larry North, Bob Barrett, stating that this was a gift to the fellowship and that the basic text was written out of an act of love. Well, with this act of love, it really doesn't matter what edition of the basic text that we're reading, and it's much that we're getting the message out to addicts and helping addicts. We really need to come together. So the question is what is really all this controversy all about? What's the real issue? So what we're getting at here is that we want to help other addicts. And I'd rather be spiritually correct than politically correct. So we want to get into the heart of the issue. The basic text is owned by the groups. It's owned by Narcotics Anonymous. All else is not Narcotics Anonymous. The service structure is not Narcotics Anonymous. And the corporation's not Narcotics Anonymous. What the real controversy is about? It's about money. And it's about the corporation trying to keep and control the money. So let's talk about the money then. The cost of a 6th edition basic text is $2.15. The price to addicts is $11.55. The profit to the NAS Corporation is $9.40. As you can see, that's quite a bit of profit. It seems a little excessive to me. It takes a lot of money though to pay for those big expensive buildings and those big salaries. In contrast, we look at the cost of a baby blue. A baby blue costs $1.20. The price to addicts is free. So as you can see, there's a big difference. There's no profit. Addicts are reaching into their pocket out of love and buying books in order to give freely to those in need. After all, isn't that our promise? A message of hope? A promise of freedom? So that's what this is about. Wait a minute, $1.20 a book? How do we do that? Well, we do that like we do everything else in Narcotics Anonymous. We do it together. By groups gathering together all over the world in order to get these books, we can get them at $120 per 100. Now that includes shipping and taxes. So literally, it's $1.20 a book. And addicts are buying these all over the world and give them to addicts in need out of love. The reason the prices are so low is because there's addicts all over the world doing this. This is really a we thing. This is an act of home groups throughout the world. So it's pretty apparent what the real issue is now. The real issue is that the corporation isn't making the money off of the books that they need to make in order to pay those salaries and those high expenses. So what is the corporation doing in order to protect their financial interest? They're claiming to be Narcotics Anonymous. And not only that, they're spreading out many rumors and many lies. Here's some facts. Here's just a few examples of some of those claims. The corporation claims that in 1984, the fellowship voted to remove the language from traditions 4 and 9 that had just been put back in the year previous at the fellowship's demand. The fact is, the Board of Trustees called an emergency vote because a group from Nebraska questioned the decision. The letter from Nebraska was not a motion, and the emergency vote was out of line from the procedure and the traditions. Many of the RSRs did not want to vote without the groups deciding on what they should do. As you can see, all this information is documented, and you can look it up in the following links and in the following minutes. So here's another one of those claims. The corporation claims that Grateful Dave and others made unauthorized changes to the basic text. But the fact is, the home groups responsible did not change the basic text. They restored it to the last version that the groups approved. The only exception to this is that they put in the little white book revisions, which were also approved by the groups. So the little baby blue is in essence the book that the groups approved through group conscience. So here's another one. The corporation says that the fellowship approved the 5th edition after edits to the 4th edition had went too far. Well, neither the 4th edition or the 5th edition went back to the fellowship for approval. After the fellowship's outrage at the deep edits and missing lines from the 4th edition, it was decided on the floor of the WSC by the RSRs and other voting members that they would simply reinsert the missing lines. This ignored the deep edit and still did not send the book back to the groups for review. Page 20 of the 1988 WSC minutes shows these motions and shows the votes to suspend the rules and to simply reinsert the missing lines. So bottom line is that this never went back to the groups. After that, a 5-year moratorium prevented the groups from having their voices heard at the WSC. So they set a 5-year moratorium on keeping those books from being made. Now, this is when the baby blue came out, and the groups decided to follow their group conscience and do as they felt that they had originally voted on in the group conscience and that was approved by the groups. These 2nd edition books with the little white book revisions were originally pink, but later they moved to the color blue, and that's where they are today. Another one of these claims was that the 1991 court case established the WSO as the sole publisher of NA literature and forbade the publication of the baby blue and resulted in the fellowship affirming this. But the fact is, the order was actually an agreement between Dave and the WSO Inc. It was not binding by any home group or any home group member or any addict other than Dave. The WSO sued Dave and not any home groups. The WSO agreed to several things during this court case which they failed to do. They also misrepresented themselves at the WSC in 1982, and sadly, Dave passed away before anything could be heard in court. This motion is not available, but the WSO does have knowledge of it, that it did happen. We'll just leave it at this. The corporation claims they just don't want to sue the baby blue supporters. But the fact is, they cannot sue the baby blue supporters because baby blue production is neither illegal or illicit. The basic text is not and never has been owned by NAS. The corporation cannot sue because the books are owned by the groups, not by the corporation. So instead, they have chosen to incite groups to go against groups. Home groups not involved in the case have continued to produce baby blues since the 80s. It's documented and it's in the 1991 WSC minutes. So the corporation, they can go to the regions or the areas or whatever and ask groups to be removed from the schedules. They can pit addicts against addicts, but they can't stop us from freely giving literature to addicts in need. Group autonomy gives each group the right to accept or reject any decision made in its behalf, even if the decision is otherwise supported or rejected by the vast majority of NA groups. This is what our traditions are all about. This is what autonomy is all about. So, are the baby blue supporters trying to overthrow or defund NAS? Absolutely not. However, let's just take a look at this book, this basic text that was signed by our founder, Jimmy Kinnon, when writing to Dennis. If you can't join them, fight them. We cannot submit to injustice of any kind. To be clean, to be free, to choose the right. We do the right thing for the right reasons. We are in the right direction. Love, Jimmy Kinnon. As baby blue supporters, we act in love. We follow our traditions. The 5th tradition states each group has but one primary purpose, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. That's what we do. We get our message, the heart of our message, the basic text, to any addict in need, and we do it for free. We do it for free because it's the right thing to do, for the right reason to do it. So that's it. Our gratitude prayer says, "My gratitude speaks when I care and when I share with others the NA way." Support your home group. Carry a message of love. Get literature freely into the hands of addicts in need. Addicts are dying and they need our help. We need to reach out. These addicts, they need our love and they need our literature. So give freely. Once again, this message is made, this whole video is made in the spirit of unity and love. We need to work together, come together, and get the literature out to addicts in need as much as possible. The fellowship relies on addicts helping addicts. It's the heart blood and the lifeblood of our fellowship. So thanks for listening. I hope you learned something, and I thank you for allowing me to carry this message to you. Get out there, spread the baby blues, spread our basic text, and spread our message of love.
Nothing can lead to another. It doesn't take any sacrifice.